Jezreel, Israel, 842 BC. I'll never forget the day I stood in the shadow of that cursed palace, the air thick with the stench of blood and betrayal. Jezebel, the queen who'd ruled with an iron fist, was screaming as she was hurled from the window of her tower, her body crashing to the ground below with a sickening thud. I watched, frozen, as blood sprayed across the stone wall, her once regal form mangled and broken. Then came the dogs wild, snarling beasts that tore into her flesh with savage hunger, leaving nothing but her skull and the palms of her hands. The sound of their growls, the wet rip of meat, and the distant clatter of Jehu's chariot still haunt my dreams. This wasn't just a death. It was a reckoning, a gruesome end for a queen who'd defied the heavens and drenched Israel in sin. I was there, a trembling witness in the crowd, as Jezebel, the most powerful and wicked queen Israel had ever known, paid the ultimate price for her crimes. She'd manipulated kings, slaughtered prophets, and worshipped false gods. But her arrogance led her straight to this horrifying fate. Was this divine justice, or the brutal hand of man who orchestrated her downfall? And why did it have to be so savage? I'm dragging you into this blood-soaked nightmare straight from Torture Vault, where we unearth the darkest horrors of history. Jezebel's story is one of power, defiance, and a death so gruesome it's been whispered about for centuries, etched into the pages of the Bible itself. In the Book of Kings, buckle up, because this tale will chill you to the bone, and I promise, you won't look away. Sidon, Phoenicia, 9th century BC. I can still picture the first time I heard of Jezebel, long before her name became a curse on every tongue in Israel. She was a princess of Sidon, a Phoenician city far from the dusty hills of Jezreel, born into a world of wealth and pagan gods. I was just a young scribe in the court of Israel when whispers of her beauty reached us, hair as dark as a raven's wing, eyes that could command a king, and a mind sharper than any sword. She was the daughter of Ethbaal, a king who worshipped Baal, the storm god, with blood-soaked rituals that made even the bravest shudder. In the 9th century BC, Jezebel was sent to Israel to marry King Ahab, a union meant to seal a political alliance between our nations. But I knew, even then, that this marriage would bring nothing but darkness. Israel was a kingdom on the edge when Jezebel arrived. I'd seen the tension in the streets of Samaria, our capital, where the worship of Yahweh clashed with the growing influence of foreign gods. Ahab was a weak king, easily swayed, and Jezebel, she was a storm waiting to break. She didn't just bring her beauty, she brought her gods, her rituals, her thirst for power. I watched as she turned the palace into a shrine for Baal, erecting altars where priests chanted under flickering torchlight, their voices echoing through the halls like a sinister hymn. Jezebel wasn't content to be a queen. She wanted to reshape Israel in her image, to erase our faith and replace it with her own. She held Ahab in the palm of her hand, whispering commands that turned him into her puppet, his crown nothing more than a decoration, while she ruled in truth. I saw the cracks forming in our kingdom, our people torn between the old ways and Jezebel's new gods. She didn't just worship Baal, she forced it on us, tearing down our sacred places and replacing them with her idols. I heard the stories of her cruelty, the way she'd order the deaths of anyone who dared to resist. The Book of Kings, a record I studied years later, speaks of her as a queen who brought detestable things to Israel, leading Ahab into sin. But I didn't need those words to know the truth. I saw it with my own eyes. Jezebel was a force of nature, a woman whose beauty and cunning made her unstoppable, but also marked her for a fall so brutal it would echo through the ages. I knew her reign couldn't last, not when she dared to defy the God of Israel. Samaria, Israel, 9th century BC. I can still feel the chill that ran through me the first time I saw Jezebel's wrath up close. It was in the royal court of Samaria, where I served as a scribe, that I witnessed her true nature, a queen who ruled not with mercy, but with blood. She stood on her throne, draped in silks that shimmered like the night sky, her eyes cold as she ordered the slaughter of Yahweh's prophets. I watched, my hands trembling as I recorded the names of the fallen, their cries echoing through the valley as her soldiers hunted them down like animals. The Book of Kings later told of how she had hundreds killed, but I was there. I saw the blood-soaked blades, heard the screams, and felt the air grow heavy with death. Only a few were spared, hidden by Obadiah, a loyal servant who risked everything to defy her. Jezebel didn't just kill, she corrupted. I saw her build temples to Baal, their altars stained with the blood of sacrifices, the air thick with the smoke of burning offerings. She'd stand at the center of those rituals, her voice chanting prayers to a God I couldn't understand, her presence commanding the priests who danced around her like shadows. I'd walk past those temples on my way to the palace, the distance no more than a few hundred yards, and hear the eerie chants that sent shivers down my spine. She forced Baal worship on Israel, tearing down our sacred altars and replacing them with her idols, her influence spreading like a plague. I saw our people, once faithful to Yahweh, bow to her gods, their fear of her wrath outweighing their faith. But it was her control over Ahab that chilled me the most. I'd sit in the court, my quill scratching against parchment, as she whispered in his ear, her words turning him into a puppet king. Ahab was weak, a man who craved power, but lacked the spine to wield it. I watched as Jezebel made every decision, her voice the true law of Israel, her will the chain that bound him. I heard the stories of her manipulations, how she'd orchestrate murders to secure land or silence dissent, her hands never stained, but always dripping with guilt. The court became a den of shadows, where fear ruled and loyalty was bought with blood. I'd see her smile, a cold, calculated curve of her lips, as she bent the kingdom to her whims, her beauty a mask for the monster within. Her actions tore Israel apart. I saw the division grow, families split between Yahweh and Baal, villages burned for resisting her decrees, and the faithful hunted like prey. The Book of Kings speaks of her as a wicked woman, but I knew her as a queen who'd stop at nothing to hold power, even if it meant bathing the land in blood. I felt the tension building, the anger of the righteous simmering beneath the surface, waiting for a spark to ignite their vengeance. I knew Jezebel's cruelty would be her undoing, and I wasn't wrong. Her reign of terror set the stage for a reckoning, one that would come with fire from the heavens and a prophet who'd bring her to her knees. Mount Carmel, Israel, 9th century BC. I stood among the crowd on Mount Carmel, my heart racing as the air crackled with tension. It was a day that would change everything, a day I'll never forget. Elijah, the prophet of Yahweh, had come to challenge Jezebel's power. facing off against 450 of her priests of Baal in a showdown that would decide the fate of Israel's faith. I watched, my breath shallow, as the two altars were prepared, one for Baal, one for Yahweh, each piled high with wood and a slaughtered bull. The deal was simple: whichever god sent fire from the heavens to consume the offering would be the true God. But I knew this wasn't just a test of faith. It was a declaration of war against Jezebel's reign. I saw her priests first, their voices rising in a frenzied chant as they danced around their altar, their robes stained with sweat and blood. They called on Baal for hours, slashing themselves with knives, their cries growing desperate as the sun climbed higher in the sky. I heard Elijah mock them, his voice sharp as he taunted. "Shout louder, maybe your God's asleep," the crowd murmured, some laughing, others trembling, but I couldn't look away. Baal's altar remained cold, untouched by flame, and I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Yahweh would show his power after all. Jezebel wasn't there. She stayed safe in her palace, but I could feel her shadow looming over us, her faith in Baal unshaken even as her priests failed. Then it was Elijah's turn. I watched him rebuild Yahweh's altar with 12 stones, his hands steady as he placed the wood and the sacrifice. He dug a trench around it, deep enough to hold gallons of water, and ordered it filled 3 times until the altar was soaked, the trench brimming. I thought he was mad. How could fire burn through that? But then he prayed, his voice booming across the mountaintop, calling on the God of Israel to show his might. I'll never forget what happened next. A blinding flash, a roar like thunder, and fire fell from the sky, consuming the altar in an instant. The flames devoured the wood, the bull, even the water in the trench, leaving nothing but scorched earth. I fell to my knees with the crowd, our voices shouting, "The Lord, He is God." The power of Yahweh was undeniable, and Jezebel's priests stood frozen, their faces pale with terror. I watched as Elijah seized the moment, ordering the crowd to grab the priests of Baal. They dragged them down to the Kishon Brook, a stream just a few miles away, and I heard the screams as they were slaughtered, their blood staining the water red. It was a brutal victory. But I knew it wasn't the end. Jezebel wouldn't let this stand. I heard later that she sent a message to Elijah, swearing to kill him, her rage burning hotter than the fire that had just humbled her gods. I felt the storm brewing, the clash between Jezebel's defiance and Yahweh's wrath. I knew her time was running out, and her end would be as savage as her sins. Jezreel, Israel, 9th century BC. I was in Jezreel when Jezebel's crimes finally caught up with her, a day that still makes my blood run cold. Her cruelty had reached its peak years earlier, with the murder of Naboth, a humble man who owned a vineyard near the palace. I was in the court that day, my quill trembling as I recorded the orders she gave. Naboth had refused to sell his land to Ahab, and Jezebel wouldn't let that stand. I watched as she orchestrated a sham trial, her voice cold as she commanded false witnesses to accuse Naboth of blasphemy. I saw them drag him out of the city, stones flying as they pelted him to death, his screams fading into silence. Ahab took the vineyard with a smile, but I knew that blood would demand blood. Elijah knew it too. I stood in the crowd when he confronted Ahab, his voice like thunder as he delivered God's judgment. He pointed at the king, his words a curse in the place where dogs licked Naboth's blood. "They'll lick yours, and Jezebel's body will be devoured by dogs in Jezreel." I felt the weight of those words, a prophecy that sent shivers through the palace. Ahab died not long after, his blood indeed licked by dogs after a battle, just as Elijah foretold. But Jezebel, her fate was far worse. I was there in 842 BC when Jehu, a commander anointed by God, rode into Jezreel to fulfill the prophecy. I watched from the edge of the city, my heart pounding, as his chariot thundered through the gates, his soldiers ready to cleanse Israel of her stain. Jezebel knew her time was up, but she refused to go quietly. I saw her at the palace window, her face painted with kohl, her hair adorned with jewels, her silks shimmering in the sunlight. She called out to Jehu, her voice dripping with defiance, trying to manipulate him as she had so many others. But Jehu wasn't Ahab. He wouldn't bend. I heard him shout to the eunuchs at her side, his voice sharp, "Throw her down." I watched, my breath caught in my throat, as they grabbed her, her screams echoing as they hurled her from the window. She fell, her body slamming into the ground below, blood spraying across the stone wall like a grotesque fountain. I couldn't look away as Jehu's horses trampled her, their hooves crushing what was left. And then, the dogs came snarling, ravenous beasts that tore into her flesh, their teeth ripping through her until nothing remained but her skull and the palms of her hands. I stood there, the stench of blood and death filling the air, as Jehu rode off, his mission complete. The Book of Kings records it all, 2 Kings 9:33-37. Her body devoured, just as Elijah had prophesied, a testament to divine justice. I felt a twisted sense of relief. Jezebel's reign of terror was over, but at what cost? Her death was as savage as her life, a fitting end for a queen who defied God himself. Jezreel, Israel, 842 BC. I stood in the ruins of Jezreel that day, the taste of dust and blood still lingering in the air. As Jezebel's reign came to its gruesome end, her death wasn't just the fall of a queen, it was a warning etched in blood, a story that would echo through the ages. I've carried her tale with me all these years, a scar on my soul I can't erase. Jezebel became a symbol of arrogance and corruption, her name a curse in the mouths of the faithful. The Book of Kings immortalized her as the epitome of wickedness, a queen who led Israel into sin and paid the ultimate price. I've seen her story retold in countless ways, her name now a synonym for treachery and manipulation, a cautionary tale whispered across generations. But I can't help but wonder, was Jezebel a victim of her time? A woman too powerful for a world that feared her? Or was she the architect of her own destruction? I saw her cruelty firsthand, the blood of Naboth, the slaughtered prophets, the shattered faith of a nation, but I also saw her defiance, her unyielding will to rule. Her story, recorded in the ancient texts of 2 Kings, is a reminder of what happens when power blinds you to justice. I learned a brutal lesson from her fall. Power, when unchecked, invites its own reckoning, and even the mightiest can't escape the consequences of their sins. Jezebel thought she could defy God and man alike, but in the end, she was devoured by the very chaos she created. What do you think of her fate? Was she a monster who deserved her gruesome end, or a queen misunderstood by history? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below, and let's dig deeper into this bloody tale. I hope Jezebel's story left you trembling. I know it still haunts me. If you're as gripped by these dark corners of history as I am, then Torture Vault is your kind of place. We've got more blood-soaked tales waiting for you, like the tragic end of Catherine Howard, beheaded for betrayal, or Anne Boleyn, another queen who fell to the wrath of a king. Check them out in our playlist. And don't miss what's coming next. I'm digging into the horrors of the Spanish Inquisition, where the screams echo just as loudly as Jezebel's did. Hit that subscribe button, tap the bell so you don't miss a single nightmare, and give this video a like if it sent chills down your spine. I want to know what shocked you most about Jezebel's gruesome fate. Was it her brutal death, or the divine justice that brought her down? Share your thoughts below. I read every comment. Thanks for joining me on this descent into terror. I'll see you in the next dark corner of history. Until then, stay safe and don't tempt fate like Jezebel did.